I have a joint release with Congressman Ron Paul. And I know this is really a difficult thing. Conservatives don't understand this. But keep in mind, I was ranked up until about 2 weeks ago as #1 most conservative member of the United States Senate out of all 100. Because of that position, I went from #1 down to number 16. I knew it would happen, and I'm going to win this thing before it's over. It's kind of like it was on global warming. It took 9 years to win that. I don't want to have to spend 9 years winning this, but I will. So with that, I'm going to open it up and answer any questions you have. Yes, sir.
Just before we started, you said you were going to comment about Libya, because like I said, it's hard to see my troops being sent over there. And it really doesn't have anything to do with the money. I'm just tired of seeing our troops continually sent over there.
In Libya, I disagreed with sending troops, and you know that because it's been in the papers. I was very much in agreement with what we're doing right now, what we did in Iraq, and what we are doing in Afghanistan. That had to be done. But in Libya, when you start with how overworked our troops are, and I mentioned with our reserve component how much overworked they are, that this was not a fight that we should, and first of all, it wasn't defined. When the president sent it, he didn't consult, he said he consulted Congress, and there might have been some people he consulted. It wasn't me, though, and I'm the second ranking member of the Armed Services Committee, so it should have been. Instead of that, he sent them over, and then it's, of course, too late. It's done, and they're over there. But he didn't say anything, and he said he didn't want regime change. Well, wait a minute. The whole idea there is to go after Gaddafi, and all the things that are going on right now. People realize it. So I think that was a mistake. It might have been something that would have been worthwhile if we weren't so strained in our military. But I don't see the cause. I don't see our purpose of that. So I don't know how long-term that commitment's going to be. It's undefined right now because the president won't say anything about it. He won't say why he sent him, won't say why he doesn't want a regime change. And so consequently, I don't know anything other than what we have already done. And I think it was a mistake to do. You know, at the same time that that's going on, you've got Egypt and Syria and Iran and that whole world over there where people are protesting against the abusive power that's been there, and it's when you see it happening, it's just widespread. I think that when we went through at the early on in Iraq and made some changes at that time, other countries look and they see, women look and say, wait a minute, women are voting in Iraq now, and they're having weddings where they can do it without worrying about being mowed down, and as has been happening. So I think what you're seeing in that part of the world is it's a wake-up call that the abuse is just, it may have worked for a long time, but and you wonder where all the do-gooder women's rights are when you see the abuse of women over there. They're nowhere to be seen. Okay. Yes, sir.
Is Social Security safe for the time being?
Well, yeah, that's a good way to leave it. It's safe for the time being because it's a sacred cow, and there will be. But the price that we pay for it, that's a different thing, because everything we're doing is borrowing. Now that's going to change after 2012, but right now it isn't. And if you just apply the math that we talked about and how much it costs the average Oklahoma taxpayer when you do these things, it's pretty frightening. But whatever the cost is, it's going to be there. There has never really been a trust fund where that money's been spent or borrowed against, or spent. It's the same thing. So, but for the time being, yeah, you're safe.
Thank you.
Senator,
yes, sir.
First off, I want to thank you for coming in and allowing us to meet with you. It's not often we get to do that. But in the latest fiasco in Washington, D.C. in relationship to the budget, you know that of all the dealings that went back and forth on that budget, and the threat of closing down government and all of the doubt that we had in relationship to whether or not it was going to progress past a certain date, it seemed odd to me or strange to me that the Democrats and the Republicans talked about it after the news meeting came on afterwards and said that we were the winners in this, and we did this and we did that, when in fact there was no winners in it. It was all losers, and the biggest losers are the American public. It just seems to me like the politicians in Washington have lost sight of the reasons they're supposed to be there.
Mhm.
And the reasons they're supposed to be there is not for winning this or winning that, it's for the best of the American public. Could you comment a little
I
bit on
can,
that?
yeah. You're asking the right person. Actually, you're asking the wrong person because I voted against it. And I voted against it for the very reason that they're talking about. There's one good thing that happened. And that is it continued the funding of the military through the end of the fiscal year, September 30th. But that's the good news. The bad news is it continued at $17 billion less than even Obama's budget. So it's a starvation for the military. It's still better than just going from week to week on what they call continuing resolutions. But no, I thought the whole thing was not good, and it just sickened me to hear people argue about who is the big winner in the thing, because there wasn't a big winner. The words that you just said, I said on the Senate floor when I voted against it.
Well, I didn't hear you, so I wasn't quoting you.
Oh, no, I said that there's no big winner. There's no winner here because there wasn't. And I just, all I can say is that they're all looking for a way. The reason that I'm not concerned about the voting on shutting down government is we've already had 3 votes during the Obama administration to increase the debt limits. Now, that's going to come up next. And each time they say the world will come to an end if you don't do it. But wait a minute, the world's coming to an end anyway. With the spending levels where they are, you can't sustain that. And I don't think there's anyone who thinks that we can. Again, I'm not here as the prophet of doom. I'm optimistic because we've gone so far over it that the sleeping America, who normally doesn't pay attention, is awake now. And I believe that some good things are going to happen. I agree with you. I agree. You know, you folks, when I look out here at you, I don't see, 100 people. I see, there's a book that you can get by Dan Nemo called American Political Patterns. And in the book, you come to the conclusion that the decisions of this country are made by 1/2 of 1% of the people. And those are the people who will leave a beautiful day and come listen to somebody like me when he comes to town. So I look at each one of you as an army of 200. And I really mean that. Because I can tell by the questions you ask when you come in. So that's the reason that I go around. If we get a relatively small group of people, they're the ones that are the opinion makers, and they're the ones that you can reach, who reach other people. Get that book. It's kind of interesting. Then you can find out how important you are for showing up. Yes, sir.
I'd like to switch the subject to energy just for a second. Over my lifetime, which is short, but over the last 40 years, we hear arguments about the fact that we shouldn't drill in our country because we ought to use their cheaper oil.
Mm-hmm.
And then we hear the argument, oh my gosh, their oil is costing us a fortune, and we should do more drilling here. And so I guess what I'm asking is, what is the right answer? I mean, because you hear arguments both ways.
I was wondering when that's going to be asked, and that's probably the most important question that could be asked, and you're asking the right person. That's what I do. The CRS, the Congressional Research Service, came out, and nobody argues with their results. Democrats, Republicans, they're accurate. Less than a year ago, they came to the conclusion that for the first time, America has the largest recoverable reserves in coal, gas, and oil of any of the countries anywhere else in the world. So we're number one. I mean, I've got a chart on the Senate floor I use showing where Saudi Arabia is, where China is, and all that stuff. So we have all these recoverable reserves. Now, the president will say over and over again, well, we only produce 2% of the oil, and we consume 25%. He's lying, and he knows he's lying. It's not just a mistake. He knows he's lying because he's talking about proven reserves. To prove a reserve, you have to drill, but government won't let us drill. 83% of our public lands are off limits because of the environmentalists trying to stop us from producing fossil fuel. And the East Coast and the West Coast, North Slope. I went up 20 years ago when they had the Exxon Valdez. Remember that? There was an oil spill, disastrous up in Prince William Sound. I went up there, and the environmentalists were celebrating. And I said, what in the world are you doing? He said, well, we're going to parlay this into stopping all drilling in ANWR, the North Slope. And I said, wait a minute, that doesn't make sense. That was a transportation accident. If you stop us from producing our own, we're going to have to transport more of this over. and the likelihood of another accident is much greater, not less. And they said, we don't care. And they did. That's what they used. Then the Gulf thing came out a little over a year ago, a couple of years ago now, I guess it is. And down there they were celebrating. They were celebrating because they're going to be able to stop us from, immediately there's a moratorium on deep water drilling on the Gulf. Remember that. And then the public forced them, through public opinion, to lift the moratorium, so the president just didn't issue any permits. Only 2 permits up until 3 weeks ago when he gave his energy speech. And then I was the one that was asked, that responded to his energy speech on Fox. And what he had said at that time is going over all this stuff, but there's enough pressure that he issued right before that speech 5 more permits. So to listen to John Kerry and Barbara Boxer and all these people stand up and say we've got to stop our dependence on the Middle East for oil, we've got to go to green energy. Yeah, I want green energy, that's fine. And when I'm dead and gone, they'll figure something out. Technology, they're making great technological advances right now. In the meantime, you can't run America, you can't run the machine without fossil fuel. And I'm talking about all 3, gas, oil, and coal. And so with clean coal technology, and we can do it. All we have to do is get the politicians out of the picture so that we can develop our own resources. And I can prove, and I have done this, that if we were to do that, to release all of our, just like every other country in the world, exploit our own resources, if we were to do that, we wouldn't be dependent upon the Middle East for any oil at all. We could still do some for Mexico and Canada, and we'd be completely independent. So that is the great frustration that I have when I hear people like John Kerry and others. I like these people, but they are just philosophically way over here where, frankly, where the money is, and that's with the environmentalists. So I think we're going to win that one. Right now, we're particularly in it may have taken Nancy Pelosi 6 months to figure out that natural gas is a fossil fuel, but she did find it. And so I think we're going to win that one. And we have these when I say that we have enough, if you count the shale that's out there now, we have enough natural gas to run this country for 99 years, for 100 years. And we have enough oil to run it for 50 years right now that we can get. And so that's why that should not even be an issue. But it's an issue that's driven by the far left. And I've had to, on the committee, sit next to Barbara Boxer 3.5 hours a week. So if you guys don't appreciate me, you just stop and think about that. If you have. I forgot what your question is, but that's the answer. Yes.
Are they looking now at a ban on hydraulic fracking?
Oh, you see, all right. Yes. And so in this energy speech that he used, this was only 3 weeks ago. The president gave the energy speech. Remember that? In there he said we have to be more reliant upon greater use of natural gas. And then he went further and said we're going to have to stop this procedure called hydraulic fracturing. Well, in Oklahoma, we did the first hydraulic fracturing in 1948. We've been doing it for 60 years. 60 years. And we've never had one documented case of groundwater contamination. And yet, again, we're getting back to the environmentalists. They want to stop and I have a chart I normally use, and I used it just last week, that shows, it's 5 miles down between the aquifer and where these type formations are. And there's never been a case of leakage back up to the aquifer. So they're doing everything they can to kill hydraulic fracturing. It's the president. And by the way, Lisa Jackson is his environmental protection agency director. She's really a good person.